Imagine this. You're a high achieving leader, perhaps a woman in your midlife, and you're in a leadership role, juggling the demands of your career and personal life in a world that never seems to slow down. You're driven, ambitious, and really committed to making a difference, leaving a legacy, doing meaningful stuff, but the constant pressure to perform at your peak is perhaps leaving you exhausted, stressed, and on the brink of burnout, perhaps. You know that something needs to change. But the idea of prioritizing self care feels like a luxury, perhaps you can't afford or you don't have time for. Now, listen, does any of this sound familiar? Well, welcome to Sleeping Your Way to Success. We're going to unveil the mindful leader's secret weapon. For those of you I haven't met yet, I'm Dr. Geneva, top leadership voice here on LinkedIn, on a mission to empower people, particularly women, in leadership roles to lead with greater success and impact. And let me tell you, I now am a student of well being. Much later in my career, I realized how important well being was to my success as a driven, ambitious, successful leader. I used to, before I discovered it, didn't have that all the energy that I needed to have when I needed to have it, got burned out, got short, didn't, keep that patience and smiling all the time, what we're supposed to be doing and have that executive presence as a leader. I would struggle with that. I'd be so tired and the lack of energy, and I didn't know why. Later on in my career, I realized that a lot had to do with well being, energy, and sleep. And I then began to really focus on studying ways and that I can incorporate that into my leadership portfolio, my toolkit as a boost, as something that I could use to help me be successful. And so that's why I want to bring this conversation to you, this transformative conversation, really that will challenge the notion that success requires sacrificing your well-being. I want to define with my guest what it means to be a successful leader and by exploring how prioritizing sleep and mindfulness can revolutionize your performance, your decision making, and frankly, your overall quality of life. So, we're going to dive into the science behind why quality sleep is non negotiable for effective leadership. And I want to discuss also some powerful statistics that showcase the impact of sleep uh, deprivation on performance. And so those practical strategies, you want them, you need them, you know what to do, you know how important sleep is, but perhaps you just don't know how to integrate it, how to use it, integrate sleep into mindfulness into your busy schedule. But we're going to show you how so you can start experiencing the benefits right away. Okay. And so we want you to take care of yourself. Understand it is not a selfish indulgence to spend time as a leader, to be strategic, thoughtful, and mindful about what we're going to talk about today. In fact, it's an essential part of the new leadership, the leadership that's going to take you from today to beyond. And guess what? I have the incredible Antréa Ferguson, top mindfulness voice on LinkedIn and sleep advocate with me today. So this really makes the conversation awesome and extraordinary because she's going to share her expertise on harnessing the power of sleep and mindfulness to unlock your full potential as a leader and really cultivate this sense of inner peace and balance, no matter how chaotic your world might be. So settle back, put your questions or comments in the chat. If you do have a question, please put the word question or Q in front of your question so we can see it. It'll stand out because we've got lots of comments coming in. And so whether you're struggling with stress, burnout, or simply feel like I know what I'm supposed to do, but don't know how. Whatever it is, and you feel like perhaps there's not enough time in the day, this conversation is for you. And so I want you to, I want to say hello to everybody. And yes, we're just delighted to have you be with us today and have this conversation. And I want to welcome our guest, Antréa Ferguson. Yes, 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 indeed. Say hello to her, everyone. Got to get my video looping. Is it looping? Okay. Well, anyway, let me just bring her on. Say hello to her. Andre, I'm working with this technology. You can understand it because I know you know all about the tech. But what I'm delighted is that you're here and joining us from Amsterdam.
Yes. Good morning, Dr. Geneva, or good afternoon, I should say. Yes, I am in Amsterdam.
Yes, and so you said good afternoon, so that must mean it ain't morning time over there like it is here.
It's 2 p.m. It's 2
Okay.
p.m.
All right. Well, welcome, and I'm so delighted that you're here. I want to let all those who are listening and viewing know that I've had the pleasure of knowing and working with Andre over the past year plus. And she is extraordinary. And I watch her. She does lives on LinkedIn as well. And oh my gosh, every morning that I listen to her, I take something away. And that's why I had to bring her to you to have this conversation. I'm so delighted you're in my community because, hey, I know you can provide so much great information and focus saying hello to you. And so, let's just jump into it. I know I believed early, as I shared early on, that in my career, when I was kind of just starting out, that I believe that the more I hustled, the busier I was, this cult of busyness, that the more successful I'd be. That in order to be successful, I had to be busy. And it was fast pace, and that was the only way to succeed. But I'm not sure that's right. And so I'd like to have your thoughts on it and how can we as leaders challenge this belief and really start prioritizing rest and self-care.
Dr. Geneva, thank you so much. Thank you for having me on the show. This is like one of my passions, as you know, mindfulness, sleep, rest, you name it. And I'm also just very honored to be here because I know you don't just have anyone on your show. And I respect your work and I respect what you have done throughout the years to help lift women up, to empower them and people, and especially just really you care about people. And I know that's one of the reasons why we're having this conversation on unveiling the mindful leader's secret weapon, because it is my secret weapon. I'm a dual COO. People may know about Growth Academy, which is where we know one another. And Shanae Murray and I are always joking, but we're actually very serious about how the biology is sort of set against the entrepreneurial world because it's kind of a man's world in a certain way. But you talk about the hustle, and it's true. A lot of people do believe that a hustle culture, that's the only way that we can succeed. But we have to really, it's especially crucial for women leaders who are ignoring that crucial biological factor of sleep at any stage in their life. But there are nuances, there's important nuances of our sleep biology during phases of the cycle And even so, whether it's during your menstrual or whether it's postmenopausal or something in between, we, especially as women, have to be very in tune with these different phases because that's what empowers us to plan better, to lead with empathy, which is something that you were talking about, to perform optimally. And just, I guess, for example, and stop me whenever you want to come in and discuss this, but the follicular phase, for example, it's a time of increased focus and energy, while there's other phases that are more restorative practices. You need to offset the sleep disruptions that you may experience because we don't think about it, but women, especially, we're lunar, we're cyclic, we're cyclical, secular, and we have these phases we don't pay attention to.
Okay.
And if we don't pay attention to them, we don't understand how we affect our business.
Okay, so let me see if I can understand what you're saying. So we p people in general, but particularly women, go through these phases, these changes in our body and physically, and that affects our sleep and how we can sleep and the
Yes,
quality of our sleep?
yes.
Okay,
So we have like day 1 to 14, the follicular phase. That's like that starts on the first day of menstruation. It lasts until ovulation. And we
okay,
have the estrogen starts low and then it rises as ovulation approaches. And then many women find that their sleep quality improves as the estrogen levels increase,
got it.
especially in the days leading up to the ovulation. And then higher estrogen levels are generally associated with more REM sleep, and that's the
Okay,
stage that's linked with emotional regulation and memory consolidation. That's where you're actually healing yourself while you sleep. So that's why it's important, even
ah,
with your
okay,
memories and your emotion. And then two, ovulation. So that occurs roughly in the middle of your cycle around day 14. And that's when women start having these disturbances in their sleep. And that's because there's this surge in estrogen and what's called the luteinizing hormone, and that triggers ovulation. So then you get this spike in your body temperature, and then that can affect the sleep quality. And
okay,
then
so it's about them hormones.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly. And that
Alright, now
all
that I
comes
get.
out.
Okay. Alright, I get that. Okay.
It's all about the hormones. These are things you cannot control. But if you're
Okay.
overlooking the one thing you can control, which is your sleep, or understanding what's happening with your sleep, then that can, be a domino effect, and then it affects the quality of your work, and affects the quality of your leadership as well. And there's things that we can't control. So we just have to be really in tune, like, why am I so sleepy? Well, maybe like in the luteal phase, which is day 15 to 28, the body enters this luteal phase characterized by you have this increase in the production of your
Mhm.
progesterone. So that has a sedative effect, and that can increase your sleepiness. It influences the quality of your sleep. And then, and I haven't even gone into, and we won't, but, prepares your body for the possibility of pregnancy if you are in that phase of your life, or if body temperature rises, that can disturb your sleep. So there's all these changes, and of course that
Mhm.
affects your mood,
Mhm.
bloating, insomnia. All of these things affect how we operate. And
Okay.
then, of course, the only thing we actually ever talk about in work and in personal is the premenstrual period, which are the days leading up to the menstruation. And that's particularly challenging for sleep. And I say all of this because it's not just about being a woman and going through these and understanding, oh, now I know when to sleep, when not to sleep. It's about, even if you're a man or you're a woman working with women, understanding that there are these different cycles for half of the population. And that's going to affect their productivity, which probably leads to your next question. But
Mhm.
because I
Which
spent a
and
lot
you
of
know
time
what's on
setting
my
that up.
mind, so you know that I'm coming next for it, and that is so clearly I get it. What you're talking about is the, uh, hormones, what's happening with our bodies, particularly as women,
Yes.
that directly affects our sleep, and it's important for us to understand it, to know it, and to really be settled or okay with there are things that are perhaps out of our control. You know, there also you mentioned as you were talking about some some of the powerfulness of this information. And talking about information, I've run into so many folk who brag about, if you will,
Mm.
well, I only need 4 hours of sleep a night or what
Oh
have
gosh.
you. But isn't there a science that, in fact, you need sleep? And can you share with us some of those statistics, those powerful statistics, perhaps, that
Yes.
show how a lack of sleep can, in fact, hurt our performance?
100%. The statistics are like they're really revealing, and the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute talk about chronic sleep deprivation leading to cardiovascular disease, obesity, depression. Um, we are there's but it's not just that. It's not like, oh, just sadness and, oh, I gain a little bit of weight. No, we are talking about a direct association with psychiatric disorders, with suicidality, with people getting into wrecks. We play with the whole war, the whole nation every time there's daylight saving times. The Harvard Business Review reported that insomnia leads to the loss of 11.3 days of worker productivity, the loss of that every year. And these statistics show that sleep isn't just this personal health issue, it's a leadership issue, it's an economic issue. We have, also got stats by the Rand Corporation, how much it's really costing us, something to the tune of like 411 between 280 billion and 411 billion every single year because of
Mm,
absenteeism, because of outright mortality caused by
okay.
sleep deprivation. So, when we think about the sacrifice, or maybe we'll get to that too, but I mean, that is the sacrifice. Yes, you can become more powerful in your business, or you might die on the road to whatever business meeting you have. We have to really take this seriously, because it's also how we keep ourselves as leaders from losing good people, because we're not
Okay.
encouraging them to sleep. We have this hustle, hustle, hustle culture. And as
Mhm,
women, we especially ignore that. We understand now, we've been talking about how our cycles deeply influence our capacity for work. And
mhm.
what you were getting at is you accommodate your natural rhythm. Understanding these rhythms means that you can work smarter and not harder. Means
Got
you
it.
can live and not die.
Mhm,
It means you
mhm.
can
Okay. So
change the narrative.
right. So understanding, I'm hearing that that's a big thing you're talking about, and how important it is for us as leaders and particularly women who run organizations, run businesses, how first comes the understanding. And secondly, I think I heard about the knowledge of the importance of sleep. And, everyone from Harvard to all kinds of studies, are saying that, it's important. And when you don't have sleep or you're an insomniac, it leads to lost time at the job, lost dollars, and so it has a real effect. Can you give us a real life example of how your practices, because you're an expert in this field of mindfulness and sleep and
Sure.
well-being, how it helped you handle a tough situation at work, perhaps with more empathy and clarity because you used mindfulness and you got a good night's sleep, or didn't.
Yes. Yes. Oh, and I'm conscious of that too. Sometimes you just don't have a good night. It's not like I'm saying you can
Right.
never work hard, or there's not these exceptions to the rule. It's really when it becomes chronic that it's a problem. But mindfulness is my secret weapon. And just yesterday, I was reminded of its power because um, being on my cycle, and some people act like it's taboo, but again, half of the population, at some point in their lives will have it. I'm acutely aware of the emotional fluctuations that can come, not just with me, but also with team members, stakeholders, partners, business partners, clients. And so when a team member who is also on her cycle, and the reason I know that is because we have this open policy, we have what's called magic days. So a magic day is, and I stole that from Korea when I was working there with the government. I lived in Korea for 2 years, and they have instituted this policy where, uh, just by virtue of being a woman, you have at least 1 day off, every month.
Okay. Okay.
And so we have that in our company, and
Mhm.
it's really powerful because it's basically acknowledging that there are, um that is a form of empathy and leadership itself, is
Okay.
understanding. You have a tough situation going on just by virtue of being a woman, whether you have these really painful cycles or not. Sometimes your brain is just out of it. But again, maybe you don't get good sleep during that time. And so when I knew a team member was on her cycle yesterday, she responded with a little bit of edge to her voice. And I remembered, okay, we're having a shared experience right now. I have a heightened sensitivity, and maybe she does too. I took a mindful breath, changed
Mhm.
my approach, asked my question differently, and it turned a
Mm.
moment of potential conflict into one of those collaboration and understanding
Mhm. Because you
moments.
were aware. I
I
mean,
was
that's the
aware.
point that you're making. I wanna follow this up a little more. So, I barely remember those days, okay? But what happens with, when we're talking about women who are in midlife,
Yes.
who perhaps are, um, past the specific cycle as you were talking about it, but again, can't get to sleep, are insomniacs, are the lack of sleep, very, very busy. What about, when you're later on in midlife? Hormones or the lack of them still affect you, and what about sleep then?
Yeah, it's really the same principle. It's about
Okay.
understanding that, self self-care has a really bad rap. Like we
Why
just
is
don't
that, you
understand. It
think?
has a self-image. Well, partly because our society is so egocentric and think that the narrative that everything should be all about us and that the world should respond to us. But it's about understanding that I can't show up for you as my best self until I show up for me as my best
Mhm.
or my as my best self, as my best
Yes.
friend. And
Mhm.
so what I did was go to a hotel, the onset of my cycle, but it can be whether you're premenopausal, postmenopausal, at any cycle in your life, even, I say this again because we're women, but it's also about understanding the mindset behind women. But as a woman going through any cycle, any phase of your life, if you feel hot, cool yourself, attend to that. Take a bath if you need to, or you have to make these adjustments instead of always powering through. And the
Mhm.
staying hydrated and the sleep, I just
Mhm.
cannot stress the importance of how your mood will regulate itself. And it
Mhm.
kind of sucks sometimes because you're in different phases, but you have to recognize the trends because we all have trends. And then if
Mhm.
something is really, really off, then you need to figure out about your productive health in general. Like
Mhm.
maybe it's fibroids or polyps or something off with your hormones, thyroid. Like all of these things will directly impact your ability to lead because your mind will not be clear. And you have to have this grace to yourself and
Mhm.
say, you know what? Um, Something's not right, something is off, or something is on. But either way, just watch yourself and be very attuned to
Mhm.
when these things happen in your
Yeah.
life.
Andrea, it's so interesting because typically when you talk about a subject like self-care, sleep, drinking water, etc., it's all about the to-dos, what you can do, and we're gonna get to that, to some real practical strategies that you can give us. But you're bringing in this whole aspect of where you are physically and emotionally, and what's happening with your body, particularly as a woman, and how important it is to have that understanding and knowledge, and of course grace. But that's an interesting perspective that you're bringing to us about the understanding and knowledge.
I think it is one of these it is a huge part of mindfulness. It's just being aware as much as possible. And I've noticed that with really successful leaders, I don't care if it is Tony Robbins or Oprah Winfrey or Alex Hormozy or Bill Gates or, you know, everyone, all of these people, what they have in common, and not all of them have the best sleep habits, but guess what? The ones that do tend to live a lot longer. It's just the reality of the situation. It is the reality of the situation is that this is about life and death and understanding, being aware, situationally aware of what's happening to your body and the people around you. And
Mhm.
having the right person in the right seat means understanding what that person can do, but you can't understand their full capabilities if they're not performing to capacity, and they can't
Exactly.
perform to capacity if they're underslept and they're deprived. I don't care how much you work out, how good you eat, the underlying basis of all of that is sleep. And
Mm.
that requires you to say no to meetings sometimes, to no
Oh,
to going out with people, no
okay.
to taking on other projects because you're not taking care of yourself. And I can't give my best self to all of the clients that I do have if I'm taking on more and I'm not prepared for it for whatever
Mhm,
the reason.
mhm,
So
mhm.
what I love about being mindful of sleep and being mindful of self is that caring for yourself is caring for others. And we just have it so flipped and backwards in 2024 that caring for yourself makes you weak or makes you feeble, makes you're not really a good, leader or hustler, this or that. And it's the opposite. It's like, who is it that said they have a fiduciary responsibility to
Mhm,
show to sleep 8 hours a night
mhm,
for their shareholders.
mhm.
Like, I'm running
Mm,
a
okay.
company,
Right.
and my good decisions
Mhm,
are gonna directly affect their bag, their money.
mhm.
So I need to take the responsibility then to make sure I go to sleep so I can make good decisions that aren't emotionally driven
So
and I
let
have
me
a
ask
better capacity.
so let me ask you about that because that's always a subject of controversy. How many hours of sleep should we get?
Well, and the person I was quoting, by the way, was Jeff Bezos, and I think he said it's 7 or 8. For women, it's different again,
Oh,
and
okay.
it's so during different types and times of your cycle, you need to sleep longer, which is hard for us to understand because 'cause we're like, "Well, we only need 8 or 9." It's not actually true. Some people need less, some people need more, but the general consensus is 6 to 8 hours. And
6
once
to
you
8.
start 6
Mhm,
to 8, once
mhm.
you but it can be 9 or 10 for women depending on, and it's
Where
not just
they are.
menstruating women,
And
but
mhm,
yeah,
mhm.
in their life cycle, in whatever is going on, sometimes just having emotionally hard days, you might need more sleep because your brain needs more time to
Okay.
get to that phase of recovery where you can emotionally recover. Um,
Mhm,
but I generally would say, you have to understand who you are as a person and what your chronometer is, like what your whole rhythm and your clock is, your
mhm,
internal clock.
mhm,
So I
mhm.
function really well in the afternoon. And I know you would
Okay.
get on me anyway. We were joking about this. This better not be 3 o'clock in the morning where you are
Right,
right now. We're
right,
talking about sleep.
right. Yes,
Um,
well, before we came on, all of a sudden it occurred to me that Andrea was in Amsterdam. Well, typically, she is in Amsterdam, and so I didn't know where she was in the point, so when I asked her, and she said, "Yes, I'm in Amsterdam," I said, "Oh my goodness, is it like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning over there?" And she said it was in the afternoon. But what if it had been 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, you know?
yeah,
Mm,
so that's a good question. Like, I think what is important is we can make exceptions to the rule. Maybe we don't
okay,
get 6 or we don't get maybe I know I need 8 and I get 6 and I feel underslept or whatever. But I had an Aura ring. I did return it. I'll tell you about it in a little bit. But um, what I love about that technology, and it doesn't have to be a ring, it could be your phone or it could be whatever you use. I strongly encourage people to track their overall health, but especially your sleep. And if you do have something like an Oura ring, it'll tell you when you need to recover. And it's basically got looking at, how long you've been awake, how long you've got sleep, what your heart rate is doing, like how
mhm,
it's sleeping, and then
mhm,
what it looks like in the night. Because it can
mhm,
tell you a lot. Fortunately, I have an athlete's heart. I've been told by my by
Mhm.
my
That's
care
good.
team, and
Mhm.
also by my app. So I'm really good there. But I
Mhm.
notice when that starts to dip or change that I need to recover. So I need to
Yes.
go back under the covers and sleep a little bit more and make up for it if I had an
Mhm.
early night. Or and like when you travel, you actually have to tack on. Um, it takes like okay, so it was 7 hours, I think, to our destination from San Antonio to Amsterdam.
Okay.
And when we go back, it's gonna take 7 days because it's 1 hour to 1 day
Okay.
to get back on the clock, to get back on the time.
Back on the sleeps. Well, you've started down this path giving us some real good to-dos, things that we can do and incorporate. So, clearly one is say no.
Mhm. Yes.
And saying no, and another, of course, is the app or something that can help you figure out how you're sleeping. I use that too, and it was a game changer for me a couple of years ago, and I did 2 things. I had my Apple Watch because, you can, um you know, to have your watch do that, and
Yes.
then an app that I
Mhm.
got, and I monitored my sleep for, about 6 months. So I
Mhm.
could tell exactly what was happening, the number of sleeps, and then it tells you, whether you're in the deep sleep or the disturbed sleep and that kind of, but that was eye-opening. And then when I just did with that information was because I was aware, which I think, Andrea, has been your point throughout our conversation, because I was aware about what my sleeping patterns were and what my sleep looked like, then I could do things that made sense for me to
Mhm.
improve my sleep. And
That
so
and
that was
that
my
sounds
experience.
like you being your best friend. I mean, it's
Yeah.
so easy, I think, to be a friend to ourselves, but to be our best friends is to advocate for ourselves, and
Mhm.
the best way to advocate for someone is to know about them. So when you would take your mother or your grandmother or your partner, whoever, whoever, to the doctor for whatever reason, if they weren't around or they weren't able to speak for themselves, you were their voice and you
Mhm.
knew everything about them. You knew the medications that they took. Maybe you did know what their sleep pattern was. Maybe you were informed enough to tell the doctor and have a good conversation to be their
Mhm.
healthcare partner
Mhm.
and their greatest advocate. And
Mhm.
that needs to be us for ourselves. But you can't do it if you don't know about yourself. So I appreciate that you
Exactly.
tracked yourself with your watch and your app
Mhm.
and all those things, because then you're able to be like, uh-oh, I'm in danger. I
Mhm.
need to
Mhm.
drink some water. I need to sleep more. I need to,
Yes.
cool down. My heart rate is up, like our glucose level. There's so much that we can
Right.
learn just by
Oh my
watching.
goodness, that, and particularly when you said about the heart rate, and you think you're sleeping or what have you, and then when you check on your app, the spikes in your heart
Mhm.
rate during the night,
Mhm.
and then again, because I, as you say, became aware, I was able to check it out, talk to my doctor specifically about it, ask those questions. But I really appreciate this aspect you're bringing to us, Andrea, about being aware. Because so often you just hear, get 6 hours of sleep, turn off the lights, be in a dark room, etc. And all those things are good, but you're bringing in this dynamic of, yeah, but you got to be aware. What other strategies do you have for us? So, best friend, be your best friend. Um, uh,
Probably don't kid yourself.
don't what?
Don't kid yourself.
Don't kid yourself. Now,
Don't
say a
kid
little more about
yourself.
that.
So I think we sometimes overestimate just how much we can do. But
Ah,
sometimes
okay.
we can be fragile, and that's a fine thing. Again, it's
Mhm,
about taking care of
mhm,
yourself and being your best friend. And I'll give you an example. I might have had low sleep levels, but in any case, I was in the doctor's office and I was waiting. It was particularly a specialist. It happens to be gyno. That's just the theme of
mhm,
today, I guess.
mhm, mhm.
And I was waiting in the office. Once we got to that 45-minute mark, my heart rate, nothing in the whole day spiked my heart rate like being still in that doctor's office waiting to see
Yes.
her after 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And here I was thinking, I'm this, mindfulness,
Right. Right.
never. I was kidding myself.
Mhm.
And because I was able to look at it, I was able to take deep breaths
Mhm.
and just induce a state of calm. And
Mhm.
sometimes I think even before we go to sleep, we kid ourselves and we think we can stay up all night and we
Yes.
can do these emails and we can bang out this and that. And then guess what? Shows up in our sleep. The
Mhm.
shows up in our sleep because we
Yes.
haven't given ourselves enough time to wind down and unplug. We are overdoing it. We are pushing ourselves and then we don't show up our best selves because we haven't given ourselves the time to unwind during the night.
Yes.
Our
That
brains are so wired.
yeah, I think that unwinding is so important, and then eating right before you get in the bed or go to sleep. Those 2 I find I must unwind, but that eating, if you eat on your sleep, eat on your food, I mean, sleep on your food, it that doesn't that doesn't work. I mean,
So,
because your body can't digest,
right.
that system is working and you're trying to sleep, and the 2 conflict, and I found that that was another thing that I
Mhm,
discovered that when I cut out that and at
mhm.
least 3 hours before I went to bed, I'd have my last meal, that made a big difference, Andrea.
But that's perfect because you just demonstrated your time management skills and your mindfulness about your body and what it needed. So it
Mhm.
doesn't like to go to bed on a full stomach.
Right.
It doesn't like, and so it doesn't like to be all wound up. And so I think that what we ought to do is examine what does our body need? Because you're talking about nutrition now, and when does it need it? And so
Mhm.
for me as a vegan, I've discovered if I don't have enough protein before I go to bed, I don't have enough fuel to digest during the night.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be immediately before I go to bed, but that last meal needs to be protein packed enough for me. And so I think that if we snack or we do this and we do that, we just haven't taken a look at our nutrition, at our
Mhm.
diet.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's about being responsible. Planning in that 3 hours ahead, like makes you be more aware of the things you need to manage in your day in
Mhm.
terms of time.
Mhm.
Like, well,
Mhm.
now I need to shut it down because if I don't, I'm going to be in trouble. For everybody's sake, I should wind it down and
Yeah.
make sure that I eat now. And I'm the kind of person that will literally say no. I'm sorry I can't talk or I just won't answer my phone until the following day because I know sometimes those what were supposed to be 5-minute calls end up taking you an hour and whatever and then you're all thrown
Exactly.
off.
Exactly. Well, Andrea, you have just given us so many great gems, and I like them because a lot of them are gems that we don't hear often or don't think about, clearly putting in the saying no, winding down, but also don't, sleep on your food. And but the big thing about knowing you and your patterns, and perhaps the first thing, for all our listeners and viewers, know your sleep. Know your sleep
Yes.
patterns,
Yes.
And so as we're winding down this conversation, you got to come back. We got to do more on this. I would love for you to come back. But what one piece of advice, and all the great stuff you gave us, but what's the one thing you want to leave with us, so that we can understand the importance, the power of getting enough sleep and leading with mindfulness so that we can be awesome leaders.
So I think the biggest takeaway is that sleep and mindfulness, they're not just, you know, personal health strategies. They are professional obligations. So act as if you're Jeff Bezos, who would say, I have a fiduciary responsibility to get X amount, fill it in with whatever your amount of sleep is. And so my advice is simple: honor your need for sleep. Honor it as if your leadership depends on it because it does. You're going to show up with more empathy. you're going to be bringing your best self, and you will take care of yourself. And taking care of yourself is taking care of others. So be Jeff Bezos and manage your time wisely, but get that sleep. It's a
Yes. Oh, I love
professional
it.
duty.
I love it. I love it. I love that it's our fiduciary responsibility to take care of ourselves, to be mindful, etc. Andrea Ferguson, thank you so much.
Oh,
Top
thank you for having me.
mindful
I love
voice
this.
on LinkedIn. Appreciate you sharing your wisdom, your expertise, your point of view, which I think has elevated this conversation about sleep and mindfulness and how we as leaders, especially women in leadership roles, need to pay attention to. And if just take a few steps. Thank you so much for being
Thank
here.
you for
Love
having me.
you.
Love
And
you
promise,
too.
promise, promise you'll come back.
I will absolutely do that. It would be my pleasure.
Mwah. Love you. Thank you for joining us from Amsterdam. Wasn't she fantastic? Yes, yes. Oh, yes. So House of Melly need at least 9 hours of sleep. I believe that. And you know, it does make a difference. House of Millie, absolutely it does. And I'm just so appreciative. Yes, she was. Wasn't she great? She was fantastic. And that's why I'm going to have Andre back. You know, I knew she could bring it. Just say it like that. I knew she could bring it. Okay. So, you know, I'm just so delighted that um, Andrea was here. And as, you know, we end this conversation, I just, you know, am struck by the transformational information she's given us about sleep and mindfulness and a different perspective. You know, when we do these shows, I like to bring you those different points of view, the strategic insights, things that perhaps you don't hear all the time, or you hear, but from a different point of view. So, you know, there were a number of things that Andrea left with us saying no, winding down, making sure, you know, talking about nutrition and the things that we need, particularly as women, um, you know, just a number of pieces that she left with us. Yes. Oh, and yes, secret youth message, medicine that sleep is, but also, you know, just the whole idea of you got to know your sleep. And I found knowing my sleep was life changing for me. And it's simple. We could do it so easily, you know, either with a watch or an app, and just do it for about 2, 3 months. I mean, it doesn't take any sweat off of you. You will be really surprised, perhaps. But the point is that once you have the data, the information, you can do something with it. And so taking that step, being actionable about yourself is one of the best gifts that we can give ourselves, and a secret, a key to being an effective, awesome leader. And so that's why we had this conversation. Please let me know. Thank you for those of you who are putting in the comments what you do and leaving some of your strategies for us. And it's so fantastic. Want to continue to bring you this phenomenal information from great folk. Any feedback you have, love you so much. Remember, what I'd like you to do is find out about yourself and how your sleep patterns are going, and to remember to sleep well, lead well. See you next time.